The latest now in our breaking news, the U.S. military has shot down another high-altitude object, this time near Lake Huron. This would be the third object brought down in as many days. Let's go now to CNN's Arlette Saenz at the White House. Arlette, you have new details about this object. What are you learning?
Yeah, Paula, a senior administration official providing some new details to myself, Natasha Bertrand, and Phil Mattingly, detailing what exactly this unidentified object looked like. Now, it was flying at about 20,000 feet when it was shot down. It had been flying over part of Michigan's Upper Peninsula and then was nearing Lake Huron when ultimately it was taken down by fighter aircraft. And what this senior administration official described is that it had an octagonal shape, and there were strings hanging from it, but with no discernible payload. Another source who was briefed on the matter also shared that description. And while the U.S. has said that they haven't determined whether there was any intelligence collection capabilities to this object, they are simply not ruling that out at this moment. Now, this object was first detected by NORAD and NORCAM just last night. There was some radar contact that was made, and the U.S. sent some fighter aircraft to try to take a look and see if there was anything out there. Last night, they did not see an object and ultimately believed that it was an anomaly, a radar anomaly. But then today, they reacquired that radar contact and found this object that was going from Wisconsin over into Michigan. Now, there were concerns about the height of this aircraft. It was flying at 20,000 feet, and also its path. So there had been concerns about what it might mean for civilian aircraft. But officials say that it did not pose any imminent threat to people on the ground. But ultimately, President Biden followed the advice of his military leaders and ordered that this unidentified object be shot down. So that is what transpired today. But just to step back, this is just the latest in a series of remarkable events over the course of the last 8 days. This is the fourth time that the U.S. has shot down an aerial object in North American airspace, starting with that Chinese spy balloon, which traversed across the country for days and was ultimately shot down off the Carolina coast. Now there is this trio of unidentified objects with very few descriptors and big questions about where exactly they came from and who they belong to. The two objects that were shot down on Friday and then Saturday, we still have very limited details in what exactly these objects contained and looked like. Officials here have said that they were smaller than that Chinese spy balloon that was shot down off the waters of the East Coast. But certainly so many questions for this administration, as we have just seen unidentified object after unidentified object entering U.S. airspace. And there's questions about where they came from and what exactly it all means.
So many questions. Arlette Saenz, thank you. And let's talk more about this with CNN military analyst, retired U.S. Air Force Colonel Cedric Leighton, and CNN's national security analyst, Juliet Kayyem. All right, Colonel, thank you for being with us. What is your reaction to this?
Well, this is really interesting, and Arlette's reporting has really piqued my interest, because what you're seeing here is something that I don't think we've seen before, an octagonal object. So I don't know if that's a payload or if that's actually the balloon or the propulsion system or something else like that. So we don't have very many details, but these are the kinds of questions that we definitely have to be asking. And then the other thing that I thought was interesting from this octagonal object, we have strings coming out. Strings could be all kinds of things, but I'm looking at the possibility of those strings being antennas of one type or another, either for receiving or for transmitting information. So that's the kind of stuff that we have to analyze, have to have the DoD and other forensic specialists analyze this and really take a look at what this system actually is, how it connects with the other systems that were shot down earlier, if it does connect at all. Those are the kinds of questions that I have right now. I also note one other thing, if I may, and that's the relatively low altitude that this thing was flying at. 20,000 feet is absolutely within the realm of commercial aircraft, and that's extremely dangerous from a commercial aviation perspective. And the skies over Michigan are fairly well populated, so it's definitely something that needed to be taken care of.
And Juliet, I want to get your reaction to this. Another day, another shoot down of a so-called object.
So I want to put this in the categories of what we know and what we don't know. So what we know is that since the Chinese balloon incident a week ago and learning of other infiltrations by the Chinese of the balloon in years past, essentially NORAD, Northcom, and other agencies essentially what would you call opened up the aperture of what they were looking for. So they're getting lots of positives that they did not get before. Most of that is going to be known airplanes, whatever it may be, but there are now going to be lots more things that sort of raise the level of concern. So that's the first thing we know. These positives were anticipated, more positives. What we can't answer now is this sort of bigger aperture picking up lots of stuff that has essentially been forgiven, sort of, around in the skies, whatever else it is, because it didn't pose a threat? Or is it part of something organized for whatever surveillance? I do want to, so we don't know. And I would just want to pick up on what the congressman who was on before us, to speculate about China in all of these incidents is just, I'm sorry, it is just not right now. We do not know what these objects are. Two are described as VW size. One is now octangle. We don't know if there's balloons attached to them. So we need to just sort of understand what's going on. There's a wider lens of surveillance that is picking up things. We don't quite know what they are. And our tolerance for it after what happened with China is lower. We're going to shoot it down if it is unmanned, if it's hurting commercial or a threat to commercial aviation, and if shooting it down will not harm Americans in the homeland. That is essentially what's going on. The speculation is really premature at this stage.
And Colonel, you talked a little bit about civilian airspace. Clearly, these could potentially pose a threat to civilian aviation. Is there any way to really secure the skies against these kinds of objects?
Well, it's certainly a challenge, Paula. And, when we look at how we've secured the skies in the past, we've sometimes used draconian measures such as shutting things down in the wake of 9/11, for example, until we had a reasonable handle on what was flying in our airspace. Certainly, I don't advocate anything like that at this particular point in time. The danger to commercial aviation is, I would say, minimal at this point, but it is something that has to be taken into account. And airmen of all types, civilian as well as military, have to be on the lookout for unusual objects right now. I think heightened awareness on the part of everybody becomes really important. But having an ironclad, control mechanism for space, that's practically an impossibility, but we can certainly do a better job knowing what's in the air. And I think NORAD has certainly picked up the baton at this point in time, a little bit late, but still better late than never.